Good morning, students. As you all will be facing your SSLC exam soon, we thought of giving you a small revision session through this online classes. Okay, here I am sure all the topics are clearly taught to you in your regular classrooms. However, here we will do a small interaction session where I will teach you one complete unit from your one complete chapter from your syllabus. Okay, and it will be a brief explanation. Okay, so that I hope this session will be helpful to you in your last minute revision. Okay, so I have selected a topic known as heredity and evolution. Okay, from your science. Okay, it's a chapter 9, heredity and evolution. So let's get into the chapter and we'll do a brief explanation about all the topics that are covered under this heredity and evolution chapter. Okay. Now, under this heredity and evolution chapter, first we will be dealing with heredity, then we will move on to what is evolution. So first let's look into what is heredity and we will look into all the topics that are covered under heredity. Finally, we will move on to evolution. What is heredity? Okay, heredity is a process by which the features of an organism is passed on from one generation to another is called heredity. Generally, we say we generally use this term heredity. If you see a person and if you feel that that person has a character which that person's father or mother is also having, we generally comment saying that it's heredity. Okay, this character is heredity to you. So what is heredity? Heredity means when a character is transferred from one generation to another generation, it is known as heredity. Okay, so in a simple term, heredity is nothing but when characters or traits, that's what we use, that's what we call it in genetics. Okay, when characters are transferred from one generation to another generation, that is known as heredity. Features, when I say, it's again character. The process is done by genes. Okay, if a character has to transfer from one generation to another generation, something should be responsible for transferring it. So that responsible factor is known as genes. Okay, which actually defines the characters of an organism. Genes actually decides which character an organism must be having. So what is a gene? Gene is the functional unit of heredity. They are the actual units which carries out this heredity, which is responsible for transferring the characters from one generation to another generation. So we say gene is the functional unit of heredity. Now, every gene, what is the function of a gene? Gene actually controls one or several characteristic features in living organisms. Okay, for all the characters that you have in your body, there is one particular gene responsible for it. Okay, gene can control one character or more than one character. Now, next topic is sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is a type of reproduction where two individuals are required. One is male, another one is female. Male produce male gametes, female produce female gametes. What is a male gamete? Sperm. What is a female gamete? Egg. When sperm and egg, they come together, they fuse with each other, what happens? Zygote is formed. When male gamete sperm fuses with the female gamete egg, what is going to form? Zygote is going to form. Zygote ultimately will develop into embryo. Embryo will develop into an adult, right? A complete human body. So, sexual reproduction, the mode of reproduction that involves two individuals, one male and one female. They produce sex cells or gametes. I told you male gametes, female gametes. Male gamete is sperm, female gamete is egg, which fuse to form a new organism. Male and female gametes, they fuse to form a new organism. Male and female gamete will fuse and it will produce zygote. Zygote will develop into embryo. Embryo will develop into a new organism. Next, we will talk about, while dealing with this chapter, heredity and evolution, we can definitely not miss this person's name. Gregor Johann Mendel, look at the spelling also, Gregor Johann Mendel, he is known as father of genetics because of the tremendous work carried out by Johann Mendel. Generally I will use, I'll call him by the name Mendel. Okay, Gregor Johann Mendel. So generally we call him as Mendel. So he is known as father of genetics. He was an Australian monk by profession. He in his life he was a monk. He worked on pea plants. All major of his experiments were on pea plants, garden pea plants. Okay, these are the questions that you can expect. Gregor Johann Mendel is known as father of genetics. He conducted experiments on pea plants, okay, to understand the concept of heredity. Why he is known as father of genetics? Because his work laid the foundation of modern genetics. This concept called as genetics started with Mendel. So that is the reason he is known as father of genetics. He made 3 basic laws of inheritance. Okay, how the characters are transferred from one generation to another generation. Basis of on the basis of this particular study, he proposed 3 laws which are known as laws of inheritance. Inheritance is a process, again heredity. Okay, so which are those laws? The law of dominance, the law of segregation, and the law of independent assortment. These are the laws which was proposed by Mendel. The law of dominance and the law of segregation were proposed after doing a monohybrid cross. I will explain what is monohybrid cross. The law of independent assortment was proposed after dihybrid cross. Again I will be explaining what is a dihybrid cross. Let's see what is monohybrid cross. Okay, when you are crossing 2 plants, when you are taking 2 plants and you are crossing this plant with each other, okay, generally we say breeding. Okay, when we are crossing these 2 plants with each other, if you are considering only one character, that is known as monohybrid cross. Okay, when you are crossing 2 plants while considering only one particular character, that particular cross is known as monohybrid cross. For example, you are taking a plant. Okay, you are taking one plant. You are taking plant 1 and plant 2. Plant 1 has multiple characters. Plant 2 has multiple characters. Okay, however, you are not looking into all the characters present in these particular plants. You will be considering any one particular character. That is, for example, like Mendel did, he took 2 plants, one tall, one short. Short plants are known as dwarf plants. Okay, this tall plant might be having a violet color flower. This dwarf plant might be having a white color flower. Okay, they might be having different characters, but the only character that Mendel looked was this plant was tall, this plant is short. He neglected all other characters. Okay, even though they had different characters, he considered only the height as a different character in these 2 plants. So while considering only one particular character, if you are crossing, this tall plant and dwarf plant were crossed. Okay, so if you do this particular crossing where you consider only one particular character, such cross is known as monohybrid cross. When only one character is considered while crossing 2 organisms, then such a cross is known as monohybrid cross. Okay, so let's look into monohybrid cross, the chart of monohybrid cross. Here Mendel took one tall plant. I told you Mendel had taken 2 plants, one tall plant, one dwarf plant. Okay, you have to know here that even though these plants had different characters, the only character that Mendel was worried about was the height. Okay, he just looked at the height of one plant. Okay, the height of another plant. So one plant was tall, one plant was dwarf. So these 2 plants were considered as parent plant. Okay, these 2 plants were considered as parent plant. Now these parent plants were given alphabetical symbol known as capital T, capital T. This dwarf plant was given the alphabetical symbol small t, small t. Okay, see here this tall plants were abbreviated as capital T, capital T. this dwarf plant was abbreviated as small t, small t. Please note here that we are not using the alphabet D, we are using the small letter of capital of T. Okay, here always the dominant character is abbreviated as capital in the capital letter, and the recessive character is denoted by small letters. So capital T refers to tall plants, small t refers to dwarf plants. Okay, why 2T? Okay, can we not just use capital T in order to denote the tall plant and one small t to denote the dwarf plant? We cannot do it. Why? The reason why we are using two capital and two small letter here is because every gene, here the capital T, small t refers to genes. Okay, it refers to particular gene which is responsible for tallness. If I am using the letter capital T, this is a particular gene which is responsible for tallness of this plant, and the small t is the gene which is responsible for the dwarfness of this plant. Then why can't we use only capital T, one t and one small t here? Why are we using two? Because every gene exists in two different functional forms. Okay, so which is known as alleles. Every gene has two alleles. Okay, every gene exists in two functional forms which are known as alleles. Okay, so capital T refers to one allele of a gene, another capital T refers to another allele. So one gene exists in two functional forms which are known as alleles. So both these letters capital T and capital T refers to alleles of a particular gene. This is allele 1, this is allele 2. Similar way here also, this totally represents the gene which is responsible for dwarfness. However, single letter is known as alleles. This is allele 1, this is allele 2. Okay, so every gene exists in two functional forms. Okay, so tallness can be represented as capital T, dwarfness is represented as small t, small t. When they, see here, allelic pair of genes. Okay, so these are the allelic pairs. So that is the reason we are using two letters here. Okay, now when this plant produces gametes, this tall plant produces two gametes. Both the gametes are with capital T, capital T. Okay, now this dwarf plant, when it produces gametes, okay, if you are considering this plant as male, one plant is female, this female plant also produces gametes. Okay, here gametes are small t, small t. Now the ultimate combination that we get here as a first hybrid, when you cross tall plant and dwarf plant, this is the first generation you are getting. First generation is referred as F1 generation. Okay, this first hybrid that you get is represented as F1 generation. F refers to filial. Okay, F refers to filial. The meaning of filial is son. Okay, so when these two plants are crossed, this is a son, or this is a future generation that we are getting. That is the reason we use this term filial, F1 generation. So when we cross these two plants, we get the only combination as capital T. We get all the plants here is capital T, small t. Okay, now what we do is we take this F1 generation plant and we self-pollinate it. That means we take the pollen grains from the same plant, okay, and we use it on the plant of the same variety. Okay, so this is the F1 generation that we got as a result of crossing the tall plant with dwarf plant. So in the next step, we will be doing self-pollination. That means this self-pollination between this F1 hybrids. Okay, we say it as F1 generation, but they are the hybrids we got as a result of crossing between two different plants. So now we will self-pollinate it. That means the similar plants, the two plants of the same type, the similar hybrid plants will be self-pollinated. Okay, the two hybrid plants will be self-pollinated here. So ultimately this plant will produce gametes, this plant will also produce gametes. Here you should know that there is one capital T and one small t. It is a new combination that we are getting here. It was capital T, small t, small t. When we crossed these two plants, then we got the combination of capital T, small t. Okay, but surprisingly we should know that in this combination all the plants that we get are tall plants. Even though the combination is capital T, small t, we are getting all tall plants, no dwarf plants in F1 generation. Okay, however, when we are cross pollinating this plant, okay, they will produce gametes capital T, small t, gametes again capital T, small t. Okay, now in order to make the calculation simple, we are using the small chart. Okay, this chart is known as Punnett square. Okay, we will make use of a square. Okay, this is known as Punnett square because it was formulated by a person known as Reginald C. Punnett. Okay, so this is a Punnett square. Here we will write the gametes here. Okay, the gametes of one particular parent will be written here. The gametes of another parent will be written here. So here also you should be writing capital T and small t. Okay, the gametes of this particular parent will be written here capital T, small t. The gamete of this particular parent will be written here capital T, small t. Actually it is missing here. Then we will do the F1, then we will see what we get in F2 generation. So when, imagine here there is capital T, okay, capital T, the combination is capital T, here the combination is capital T, small t, here capital small t, capital T, again small t, okay. Here you should know that when there is a combination of capital T, all the plants are tall. When there is combination of capital T and small t, again all the plants are tall. Again here capital T, small t, plants are tall. When only there is combination of small t and small t, we get dwarf plants. Okay, here you see in F1 generation, there were no dwarf plant, all the plants were tall. In the F2 generation, we got one dwarf plant and 3 tall plants. So if you have to write the phenotypic ratio means, phenotype means the characters that you can see from outside. Now I will show you 4 plants and I will ask you to write the phenotypic ratio. Phenotypic ratio is the ratio you can write by looking at the external features of a plant. Okay, I will show you 4 plants, 3 are tall, 1 is dwarf. I will ask you to write the ratio. You will look at the plant, you will look at the morphology of the plant. Then you will say 3 are tall, 1 is dwarf. That becomes the phenotypic ratio. That means the ratio you can write after just looking at the plant. By physically looking at the plant, you can write the ratio. So here you will write the phenotypic ratio as 3:1. Why? Because 3 tall plant and 1 dwarf plant. So the ratio becomes 3:1. Okay, genotypic ratio. Genotypic ratio is the ratio which actually indicates the gene combination responsible for that particular tallness or dwarfness. Okay, here if you look into the different combination, I have already mentioned these capital and small letters indicates the gene combination. We got only one capital T, so we will write one capital T, one capital TT as the ratio 1. Then we got capital T, small t, 2 combinations, okay, in the 2 ratio. Because there are 2 capital T, small t's, so we write the ratio as this. And we got 1 small t, so we will write the ratio as this. So the ratio the genotypic ratio, which is actually indicated or denoted by the alphabetical alphabets, can be written in this way: 1:2:1. How? 1 capital TT, 2 capital T, small t's, and 1 small t, So if in the examination, if somebody is asking you for the phenotypic ratio, it should be 3:1. Genotypic ratio is 1:2:1 in this particular monohybrid cross. Okay. So that's what is mentioned here. The ratio of characters arising out of this cross at F2 generation is called as monohybrid ratio. So this is also known as monohybrid ratio because you are getting it at the end of monohybrid cross. Example, if tall plant is crossed with dwarf plant, tall plant is denoted as capital T, dwarf is denoted as small t. We get 3:1 ratio. Okay, we get 3:1 ratio. 3 tall, okay, we get 3 tall is to 1 short plant at the end of F2 generation. 3 tall and 1 dwarf. So 3:1 is the monohybrid ratio. 3:1 is the monohybrid ratio. Here the height of the plant is considered at a time. I told you when we do monohybrid cross, we consider only one particular character at a time. Here we are considering the tallness. Next we will study about something known as dominant traits and recessive traits. What are dominant traits? The traits that express themselves in an organism in every possible combination and can be seen are called as dominant traits. Okay, so I will explain it with the help of this particular chart. Here you see in F1 generation we got all tall plants. In F2 generation we got 3 tall and 1 dwarf plant. Here you should be able to note that dwarf character was missing in F1 generation. Okay, the dwarf character or the dwarfness was missing in the F1 generation. The dwarfness appeared in F2 generation. Okay, so dwarfness was missing in F1 generation. Whereas tallness or the tall character was present in both F1 generation and F2 generation. In F1 generation also we got all the tall plants. In F2 generation also we got most of the tall plants. Here we can say tallness is a dominant character because it appeared in both the generations, and dwarfness can be called as recessive character. Okay, dominant character is a character which will express, okay, which will express itself in all possible combination. Okay, so here also in F1 generation we got tall plant, F2 also we got tall plants. Okay, and you see this, even if it is in a combination of capital T, tallness is observed. Even if it is a combination of capital T and small t, still tallness is observed. Whereas if you have to see dwarfness, you have to get this combination of small t and small t. So the character which expresses itself in all the possible combinations are known as dominant traits. The traits means characters that express themselves in an organism in every possible combination and can be seen are called as dominant traits. Here also tallness was seen, here also tallness was seen. So that is the reason we call tallness as a dominant trait. In Mendel's experiment we see that tall trait in pea plants tends to express more than the short trait. Here tall trait, tall means trait means character. The character known as tallness is seen in both the generation, whereas dwarfness was not seen. Therefore, tall trait of the plant is said to be dominant over the short trait. Okay, so this tallness or the tall character is dominant over the short character. So we can say tall character, tallness was dominant and the dwarfness was a recessive character. So here you see dominant trait was tallness because it appeared in both the generation. Dwarfness is a recessive character or recessive trait. A trait which is not expressed in presence of a dominant allele is known as recessive. Here you see in this possible combination, capital T allele represents tallness, small t allele represents dwarfness. Even though in this combination small t was present, it was not able to express. That means here dwarfness was not seen. That means it becomes recessive in the presence of this dominant allele. When there is one dominant allele, the recessive allele becomes suppressive, okay, or recessive. In presence of a dominant allele, it will not be expressed. Here you can clearly see when there is one dominant allele capital T, small t did not express. Okay, so recessive character is present in an organism but cannot be seen if a dominant allele exists. Here in this particular also, even though the small t existed, it was not seen. Only tallness was seen, dwarfness was not seen. Okay, so the trait which expresses itself is known as dominant. Okay, the trait which does not express is known as recessive trait. Next we will move on to dihybrid cross. Just like monohybrid cross, when we consider two characters while crossing two organisms, then such a cross is known as dihybrid cross. Okay, when we consider two characters while doing this crossing between two organisms, then that cross is known as dihybrid cross. So here we will see how dihybrid cross is done. Okay, this is a chart for dihybrid cross. Here we will be taking again pea plant. Okay, Mendel did this experiment. He took pea plant for his experiment. What he did, he took round green seeds. See, okay, he took two plants. Okay, this is plant 1, this is plant 2. We call it as parent generation. Okay, the plants with which you are starting the experiment are known as parent generation. Here also these two were parents. Okay. Now he took two plants. One had round green seeds, another had wrinkled yellow seeds. Okay. Here he is taking seeds. Okay. In seeds itself he is considering two characters. One is the shape of the seed. Here it is round. Here it is wrinkled. Color of the seed. Here it is green. Here it is yellow. Okay. The alphabetical symbol or the gene combination that he is giving here is capital R, which represents round character, capital Y. Okay, here he is taking green, so it is represented. You can take any possible combination, just that your crossing experiment should be clear. Okay, here he has taken small y, which indicate green seeds. Okay, here you can just study according to what is given in your textbook. Okay. However, as I told you, you can use any particular alphabetical combinations, but you have to be clear with your chart. Okay. Here also wrinkled is it's denoted with small r. Yellow seeds are denoted with capital Y. Okay. So these two are the allelic combination of these particular plants. Okay. Now when they produce gametes, it will be capital R will produce one capital R, small y will produce one small y. Similar way here also small r produce one small r, capital Y produce one capital Y. When these two are crossed with each other, what we get is F1 generation. In F1 generation we got capital R, capital Y, small y. Okay, when there is even one capital R, that plant will produce round seeds. When there is one capital Y, then that particular plant is going to produce yellow seeds. Okay, because capital R and capital Y are the dominant characters, small r and small y are the recessive characters. Okay, so now by taking capital R, capital Y, small y, we can self-pollinate this particular hybrid plant. Okay, when we are crossing F1 plant with one more F1 plant, we get the possible gamete condition in this way. Okay, so these are the four possible combination of alleles that we get. Now we draw a Punnett square, we put all these combinations. Okay, here we are, male gametes are usually written on the top. Okay, and female gametes are written in one particular side. Okay, so we take all the possible combinations RY here. Okay, here also we take in the left side female parent. Okay, so one can be represented as male, another can be represented as female. Then we write all the possible combinations that we get by doing the crossing. Okay, so these are all the F1 gametes. Now ultimately, when these two plants are crossed, what is the ultimate combination that we are going to get? Okay, so that particular combination will be written here. So these 16 are the actual F2 generation we are getting. Okay, so these 16 are the F2 generation plants that we will be getting. So when we write the phenotypic ratio for that, we will get 9 round yellow, 3 round green, 3 wrinkled yellow and 1 wrinkled green. Okay, so when there is one capital R also, we can write the combination as round. There is one Y also, we will write yellow. Okay, only when there is both the Y's are small, we will write it as green. Okay, and both the are small, only then we will be writing it as wrinkled. Okay, so this is how we write the combination. Ultimately, the phenotypic ratio that we get after the dihybrid process, 9:3:3:1. Okay, generally this question will be asked, what is the combination of what is the phenotypic ratio of a dihybrid cross? It is 9:3:3:1. Okay, here you can see when two characters are considered while crossing two organisms, then such a cross is known as dihybrid cross. The ratio that we get at F2 generation is known as dihybrid ratio. If a plant with round and green pea is crossed with a plant with wrinkled and yellow pea, the first generation plants would have all round green, round, and here in this case we got round and yellow. Okay, on crossing the same in F2 generation, we get the ratio as 9:3:3:1. Okay, so this is the ratio that we are getting at the end of dihybrid cross. Then according to monohybrid and dihybrid cross, Mendel proposed 3 sets of laws: law of dominance, law of segregation and law of independent assortment. So what does law of dominance say? A gene has two contrasting alleles. Okay, I have told you a gene exists in the form of two contrasting alleles, and one always expresses itself in the organism. It is called the dominant gene and it expresses in any possible combination. So if there are two alleles for a particular gene, one allele is always dominant over the other allele. The allele which expresses are known as dominant alleles. The other allele is known as recessive allele. So the next law is law of segregation. Law of segregation is based on the fact that in this crossing experiment, you have seen in F1 generation all the plant that we got was tall. Okay, here dwarfness was missing. However, we came into F2 generation, dwarfness suddenly appeared. That means here now you can read, the traits get segregated completely during the formation of gametes. Even though we feel that these two alleles might have mixed, that is the reason we did not get the dwarf combination. It does not happen. The alleles do not mix with each other. They remain separate, and when the gametes are formed, they go to different, they go along with different gametes. That is the reason, even though dwarfness was not seen in F1 generation, it was seen in F2 generation. So that means the two alleles, capital T, small t, even though they remain together, they do not mix with each other. They segregate or separate during gamete formation. That's what the law of segregation says. Then what about law of independent assortment? It says that the traits can segregate independently of different characters during gamete formation. Now here you see there were 4 alleles remain together. Okay, even though they remain together, they do not blend with each other. However, when they have to form the gametes, see, they have formed these gametes. Okay, here they have formed these gametes. While the formation of gametes, the separation of one allele is independent of separation of another allele. Okay, the allele for yellow seeds will not wait for allele of green seeds to come with it. Okay, so that it can go to a new gamete. It does not wait. It directly goes no matter the allele for green color is coming or not. Okay, so the separation of gametes the separation of alleles happens, or separation of characters happen independently. Okay, that means one character does not depend on other character. Okay, here we can read it. The traits can segregate. Segregate means separate independently of different characters. The separation of one character does not depend on separation of another character during gamete formation. Okay. Then let's move on to the topic known as sex determination. How a person's sex is determined. The process of determining the sex of an individual based on the composition of the genetic material is called sex determination. Okay, so how do we differentiate a person as male and female? Definitely by looking at the physical characters. However, there are some genetic material also inside the body of male and female which are different from each other. So depending upon that particular genetic material, we can classify, we can decide whether an organism is male or female. In different animals, sex of an embryo is determined by different factors. Okay, in humans, sex determination happens on the basis of presence or absence of Y chromosomes. Okay, in different animals we can decide the sex by looking into different factors. However, if you are talking about human beings, okay, if we are determining the sex of human beings, then we will consider the presence of this Y chromosome. Okay, why? Because Y chromosome is the chromosome which we will find only in male. This Y chromosome will be absent in female. Okay, you know our body's every individual cell carries 46 chromosomes. Okay, out of 46 chromosomes, 44 chromosomes are known as autosomes. That means they do not take part in any particular reproductive, or they do not take part in deciding the sex of the person. Okay, these out of 46, 44 chromosomes are known as autosomes. They do not have any share in deciding the sex of an organism. Wherever the last pair of chromosome, that is 45th and 46th chromosome, they are the actual chromosomes which will decide the sex of the person. In female, this last two chromosomes are XX. Okay, the 45th and 46th chromosomes are X and X. Whereas in male, the last two chromosomes, 45th and 46th one, are X and Y. Okay, so the first 44 chromosomes are same for both male and female. Whereas the 45th chromosome is also, we can say, same because it is going to be X. Here you can see this is father, male, it is X. In female, it is X. Whereas in male, the last chromosome is Y. Whereas for female, it is again X. There is no Y chromosome in female. So depending upon the presence of Y chromosome, we will decide whether whether an individual is male or female. Okay. XX is female and XY is male. XX is female, mother, XY is male. An ovum upon fusion with Y containing sperm give rise to a male child, and upon fusion with X containing sperm give rise to a girl child. Let's look into this chart. Here you can see XX condition we will find in female, XY condition is found in male. Okay, so how sex determination is done in human beings? So let's take parents. This is a father, male. So he has the last two chromosomes as X and Y. This is mother, where she will be having last two chromosomes. Okay, so the last two chromosomes are known as allosomes or sex chromosomes. So these sex chromosomes are XX in female, XY in male. So this is father having XY, this is mother having XX. When they produce gametes, that means when they produce sperms. Okay, X goes in one sperm, Y goes in another sperm. Here, when female produce egg, no matter, they produce gametes, they produce ovum, but they will be with only one particular type of chromosome, which is X. Okay, generally they produce only one egg, so it will be having only X chromosome. They do not have two combinations. They will produce only one type of gamete, where male will produce two types of gametes, one gamete with X chromosome, another with Y chromosome. Now imagine this, the sperm carrying X chromosome is going and binding with the ovum carrying X chromosome. Then what will be the combination? The sperm carrying X chromosome combines with the egg carrying X chromosome. So the X and X, this is a combination. X and X. Again this X and X will be seen only in female. So this child which is born as a result of fusion of sperm containing X chromosome and egg containing X chromosome, this child will be a female child because the combination is XX. XX is always a female. Okay, if the, again this is the same combination. If the X containing sperm fuse with the X containing egg, the baby will be a female baby. If the sperm carrying Y chromosome combines with the egg carrying X chromosome, then the baby will be male. Okay, see the combination X and Y. Okay, here also the same combination is written, X and Y, so the baby will be male. So what is the probability? Probability is 50%. There is 50% chance for a baby to become a boy or a girl. Okay, so this is how sex determination is done in human beings. So ultimately, father is responsible for deciding the sex of the baby. Father will produce two types of sperm carrying X and sperm carrying Y chromosome. If the sperm carrying X chromosome fuses with the egg, which definitely carries X chromosome, then the baby will be XX, which is the condition of a baby girl, okay, or a female. If the sperm carrying Y chromosome fuses with the egg carrying X chromosome, there is a combination of X and Y. So ultimately the baby will be a boy, okay, a male. So that's a 50% probability of a female child, 50% probability of a male child. So ultimately this is how sex determination is done in human beings. So father is always carrying XY sex chromosomes, mother is carrying XX sex chromosomes. Okay, so this is how sex determination is done. Let's look into few other terms. Traits. I already told you, traits are characteristic features of an organism manifested in a physical form that is visible or in a physiological aspect of the organism. What are traits? Traits are nothing but characteristic features manifested in a physical form that is visible or in a physiological aspect of the organism. What are traits? Traits are characters. It can be seen in two ways. Either it is observable to a person who is looking at you from outside. By looking at you, I can say you are tall, you are fair, you have long hair, you are brown eyes. Okay, these are the features I can I can just say by looking at your physical features. Okay, that is a kind of trait that you show it to other persons. The characteristics which are observable by some other person by looking at your physical features, or physiological aspect of the organism. Physiological aspect means all the reactions or how your body organs are functioning is known as physiological aspect. Okay, maybe your digestion is good, your digestion is not good, because your digestive system is good, your digestive system is not good. That also can be decided by looking at you. Okay, by looking at a person's body, we can say whether he is physically fit, or physiologically his body is doing good. But we cannot say what is present inside his, DNA, what is present inside his nucleus. We cannot predict all those things. Okay, so traits are something that is visible. Okay, they are characteristic features of an organism manifested in that means it is, it is visible in a physical form. I told you, your height, your color of your eyes, the texture of your hair, all this is observable in a physical form. Okay, that is visible to a person who is looking at you, or in a physiological aspect of the organism. Physiology means all the function that is happening inside your body, how your organ is functioning. Okay, so this is trait. Acquired characters. Acquired characters means the traits are acquired. Acquired means gained by an organism over the period of its lifetime are termed as acquired characters. When you were born, you were not born with this particular character. However, while growing, you developed certain character. Such characters are known as acquired characters. These characters may or may not get transferred to the next generation. Inherited characters. Okay, so this is acquired character. Second type of character is inherited character. The traits that are inherited from the parents are called inherited characters. The characters that you got from your parents. Okay, sometimes you will look exactly like your father or mother. Your height, the texture of your hair, the color of your eyes. Okay, and the hair growth type pattern on your ears. It will look, you will resemble almost, you will resemble your parents to a greater extent. So that is because your parents' characters are transferred to you. So such characters are known as inherited characters. So these traits always get transferred to the next generation. That means you will also end up in transferring these characters to the next generation. But depending upon the dominance or recessiveness, it may or may not be expressed. Okay, you will transfer the character to your next generation through genes. Okay, in genes also I told you, genes have contrasting forms which are alleles. If you are transferring a dominant allele, then it will express. If you are transferring only the recessive allele, then it may not express. Depending upon its dominance and recessiveness, it may be or it may not be expressed. Examples are height, skin color and eye color. Then let's come to this topic called as natural selection. Natural selection, it is a phenomenon by which a favorable trait in a population of a species is selected. Okay? How natural selection, if I have to say it in a simple term, if nature finds you as a fit person to be on this earth, nature will allow you to stay on this earth or live on this earth. However, if the nature finds you unfit to live on this earth, then the nature will somehow make you extincted. Okay, so your existence on this earth is dependent on whether nature selects you or not. If nature has selected you, then you have to have a favorable trait, okay, to overcome the changing environment or changing earth. If you are capable enough to strongly live on this earth by solving all the obstacles, if you have that particular nature or character, then definitely you will be on this earth. However, if you become weak or if you become unfit, the nature will send you from this earth. Okay, so that's what is basically natural selection is. Okay, it is a phenomenon by which favorable trait in a population of a species is selected. Okay, changing natural conditions exert equal pressure on all the existing species. The species or organisms which are better adapted to the changing conditions survive and reproduce, that is selected by nature, and species or organisms which cannot adapt perish, that is rejected by nature. So here you can see changing natural conditions. Our nature is not constant, it keeps on changing, our environment keeps on changing. It puts a lot of pressure on the living organisms. Okay, whereas if the organism is ready to fight, okay, ready to adapt means adjust. If an organism is trying to adjust, or if the organism has succeeded in adjusting to that particular changing environment or change in the nature, then that particular organism will survive on this earth. Whereas if an organism is unable to cope up or adapt to this changing nature or changing conditions, that particular organism will perish. Okay, that organism will be deleted from the nature. Okay, that will be rejected by the nature. So nature selects who has to stay back, who has to leave. Okay, so that depends on your character. That depends on any particular organism's character. If you are strong enough to fight the change in the changes that is happening in the nature, then definitely you will survive. Okay, then let's come into this topic known as evolution. Evolution was mainly explained by this person known as Charles Darwin. Okay, he is known as father of evolution. Okay, he was an English naturalist and biologist. 5 years expedition in a ship. Okay, what happened is Charles Darwin went for a world trip, okay, in a ship called as HMS Beagle. Okay, in his trip, he went to this island called as Galapagos Island. Okay, what he saw in Galapagos Island in his trip actually helped him to write his theory of evolution. Okay, so then he wrote a book known as Origin of Species. In the year 1859 it was published. Okay, his book was named Origin of Species. Okay, how species are originated on this particular earth. Okay, in this book he actually put his theory of evolution. Now, what is a evolution? Evolution is a tangible change in the heritable characteristics of a population over several generations. Okay, tangible means something you can observe. Okay, something you can feel. Now, evolution is an organism is having a particular character that he or she has inherited from several generations. Suddenly this character starts changing. It might be due to several reasons. It might be due to cope up with the changing nature, to cope up with some adverse conditions, or to the change of its own physical character. It could be anything. The reason could be anything. However, if an organism is changing its character that has been inherited for several years, if that character is changing, then particular process is known as evolution. Okay, we know our ancestors were apes, right? Like we generally say monkey to man. Okay, we evoluted from a monkey to a man. That's what we say. This is evolution. From a monkey we evoluted as a human being. The nature of the characters of monkey kept on changing. Then came some other organism. Like we will talk about the evolution of man. Okay, that particular organism's behavior also changed. Okay, somehow from a monkey we reached the condition of a proper human being. That is known as evolution. The observable change, that's what we mean by this word tangible change, in the heritable characteristics of a population. Heritable means a character which you are inheriting or you are getting from your parents for several generations. If that is changing, that particular change is known as evolution. Evolution is nothing but change. Change, as you all know, change is constant. We keep on changing, right? So that is known as evolution. These changes can give rise to a new species, or the species might change themselves to become better adapted to the surrounding environment. Mainly the change happens just to better adapt themselves to the surrounding environment. Okay, origin of species. After a successful expedition on HMS Beagle, I told you this is a ship in which Charles Darwin went for a sea voyage. Okay, he wrote a book what he observed in Galapagos Islands. Okay, I have already told you the book's name is Origin of Species. It was completely based on natural selection. We have already discussed what is natural selection. Now, when Charles Darwin said this is natural selection, okay, the organisms which are fit to survival of the fittest. That's what was told by Charles Darwin. If you are fit, you will survive. If you are unfit, you will be destroyed. Okay, you will be rejected by the nature. Now, origin of life. Okay, how life originated on this initially. For this we have different theories. One of the theories is Haldane's theory. Okay. Now, J.B.S. Haldane was a British scientist who theorized that life originated from organic and lifeless matter. Okay, there are multiple theories when you come to first year science and second year, in your first year and second PUC classes, we will study in detail about all the theories that are that are formulated just to explain the evolution, origin of life on this earth. However, here we are studying about this theory proposed by Haldane. He said that life originated from organic and lifeless matter. Okay, many organic matter like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, all these together, they came together, they formed a life. Okay, so this theory is known as theory of abiogenesis. Abiogenesis means bio means living organisms, life. Abiogenesis means life is originating from a non-living matter. Okay, generally what now we know, like how a new organism is formed. Male produces sperm, female produces egg, both of them will fuse, it leads to zygote, then embryo, then an organism. However, how life started on this earth, okay, for that we have multiple theories. Here there is a theory known as abiogenesis. It says life originated from non-living matter, something which is not living. Okay, he was a British scientist, Haldane was a British scientist who theorized that life originated from organic when I say carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, all these matters, and lifeless matters, they don't have life. His theory was proved to be correct by Urey and Miller's experiment. Urey and Miller's experiment will be studied in detail when you come to your second PUC in a chapter known as genetics and evolution. Okay, in this unit we will be studying what was the experiment conducted by Urey and Miller. They proved that life comes from different organic matter. Okay, so it was called the theory of abiogenesis. That means life originates from non-living matter. Now, evolutionary evidences. Evolutionary evidence means if we have to, how did we come to know that dinosaur existed once upon a time? But because we got the fossil of a dinosaur. Okay, and we got to know dinosaur lived thousands of years ago by looking at the fossil. So if we have to say some evolution has happened, we need evidence, right? We need proof. Such proof that is known as evolutionary evidence. Evolutionary evidence, main important evolutionary evidence is fossils. We got to know about the existence of many organisms by looking at them, when we got the fossils of these particular organisms. There are plenty of pieces of evidence to support the theory of evolution. Fossils happen to be the biggest of them. Fossils actually give us the act as a main evidence to support theory of evolution. By looking, because we got we got fossils of different organisms, we got, this is this is how the life might have evolved on this particular earth. Fossils are the preserved remains of ancient animals or plants that died millions of years ago. You know what is a fossil? It is the preserved remains. Remains means the leftover body parts, okay, of ancient animals or plants that died millions of years ago. The fossils help us to understand the anatomy and even physiology of these organisms. Okay, by looking at the fossils, by studying the fossils, we will get to know the anatomy of a particular organism and also the physiology, how their body organs function, and understand how evolution worked and led to the formation of organisms that we see today. Okay, how fossils are formed? Fossil formation happens in multiple steps. First, organisms die and they get buried in mud. Okay, generally it happens when organisms die, there was nobody to bury it. It used to get buried in mud. What happens to the soft tissues? They get decomposed quickly. Okay, all the soft tissues will get decomposed quickly. Oh, what will be left behind? Only the bones or shells. Okay, if they are aquatic organisms or any organisms which carry shell, they will be left out. Only the hard bones and shells will be left out. The leftover, all the soft tissues will be decomposed. What happens after some time? sediments build over it. Okay, the sediments, you know, all the residue, soil residue particles, they will start building over this bones and shells. Finally, they will, in a period of year, it takes, hundreds of years for the formation of fossils, and when the sediments build over the bones and shells, they will get hardened and they will form rocks. Okay, as the bones decay, what happens? The minerals, the bone starts, decaying. The minerals which is present in the rock, it will start, seeping into the, bone. They will, there are cells in the bones also. All the bone cells will be replaced by these minerals. Okay, that is how the bones, if bones decay completely, it leaves behind the cast of the animals. Even though bones decay completely, it will leave a print of that particular organism on a particular rock. Okay, even though if you don't get the, the bones also decay, because bones are also, a type of connective tissues. Bones also will decay, but however, that print or the image of that particular organism will be seen on the rock. Okay, because that bone or that particular the image or the bone of the particular organism will stay attached to the rock for hundreds of years. Even the bone gets decomposed, that image will be there on the rock. This is how fossils are formed. Then we will have to talk about evolutionary relationship. We will talk about two types of organs, homologous and analogous organs. Evolutionary relationship proves us that if two organisms were related or not. Okay, now we say we have no connection with cheetah. But evolutionary relationship means it is a concept which says two related organisms in the process of evolution, they become completely different. However, if you look into the evolution theory, these two organisms were closely related. Okay, it talks about relationship between two organisms. How the two related organisms become separate in the process of evolution. Okay, there is a theory which supports that humans' forelimbs, that means our hands, if you look into the anatomy of humans' forelimb, it is similar to the anatomy of the forelimb of cheetah. That means we and cheetah, we both were closely related once upon a time. However, in the process of evolution, we evolved as a completely different organisms. Cheetah evolved as a completely different organism. But our forelimbs, it says we both were related organisms. By looking at the anatomy, we can say we both were related organisms. That's what this evolutionary relationship is all about. Okay? It can be deduced by studying the homologous organs and analogous organs. So, what are homologous organs? What are analogous organs? We will study. Homologous organs are those which have similar structure but different function. Okay, we will look into the example. Okay, first we will read the explanation. Homologous organs are those which have similar structure but different function. Okay, that means two organisms have a structure whose anatomy is similar but they perform different function. As I gave you the example of a forelimb of human and forelimb of cheetah. Okay, forelimb of humans, the anatomy of forelimb of human, that means our hands anatomy is similar to the anatomy of forelimb of cheetah. But why do we use our hands? For multiple purpose. To write, to eat, to do multiple household work, we use our hands. But does cheetah also use the forelimb for the same purpose? It uses only for capturing, food. It uses mainly for running. Okay, so even though the anatomy of both the forelimbs are same, the function is completely different. Such organs are known as homologous organs. Okay, the wings of birds and forelimb of mammals. Okay, wings of birds. Okay, this is completely different concept. If you look into the wings of birds and forelimb of mammals, that means our forelimbs, mammals' forelimbs and wings of birds, their anatomy is same. They have similar structure, but they perform different functions. In mammals, we use it for multiple purpose. Birds use their wings for flying. We do not use our forelimbs for flying. Okay, the function is completely different whereas the structure is similar. Okay, if you look into the tendril of pea plant and spine of barberry plant. Okay, tendril is a part which is used for climbing the tree. Okay, any plant forms tendril to climb up a tree. Spine means thorn of barberry plant. Completely different. This is a tendril, this is spine. Okay, but their anatomy is same, their structure is same. Okay, both are modified leaves. Tendril also is a modified leaf, spine is also a modified leaf. But they perform different functions. Tendril is used for climbing, spine is used for protection. Similar way, analogous organs are those which have similar function but a different structure and origin. Okay, if you look into our eyes and eyes of an octopus, both the eyes look similar, but the anatomy of these two eyes are completely different. Okay, so such structure where the analogous organs are the organs which have similar function but a different structure and origin too. Our eyes and octopus eyes, what is the function? Visibility, right? To look into, to view. The function of eye is to view. Okay, whereas the structure and origin is completely different. Okay, the examples: wings of bats, birds, and wings of insects. We say wing, the function is same. Wings of bat and wings of insects, the function is same, that is flying, but their anatomy or structure is completely different. Leaves of Opuntia and peepal tree. Okay, the leaves, what is the function? Photosynthesis. But leaves of Opuntia, they are modified stem, whereas peepal is the normal leaf. Okay, the leaves of peepal are the normal leaf, leaves of Opuntia are the modified stem. So this is the difference between homologous organs and analogous organs. So here, evolution by stage, evolution is a slow process. Evolution from monkey to man, we did not evolve in 1 to 10 years. It took thousands of years for a monkey to get converted into a man, to evolve as a man. Okay, so evolution is a slow process and does not happen overnight. There are several stages in the evolution of almost every animal that we see today. Every animal that you are seeing today, it has been evolved from some organism. Okay. Now this gradual evolutionary process is called as evolution by stages. Evolution happens by stages. When we look into human evolution, we will get to know. Artificial selection. Sometimes a single species can evolve into several different species due to artificial selection. Okay. Example, the cabbage family. A single ancestor in the cabbage family gives rise to several different species due to the selection of different traits. When nature selecting is different. When we do it, it is called as artificially selecting. For example, if you go to a supermarket, how many varieties of bell pepper or capsicum that we call can you see today? There are multiple. Where they naturally selected, we actually human beings artificially did it. Similar way, cabbage also. If you go to a supermarket and see, observe, there are multiple varieties of cabbage itself, multiple colors also. That is because we actually selected particular traits and we actually caused the one particular cabbage species to form different species. This is known as artificial selection. It is done artificially. Okay, let's look into the last topic of our class, human evolution. Humans are known to belong to the primate family. Okay, as you all know the classification, we belong to primate family. Humans today have a very close genetic combination to chimps and other primates. Chimps, when I say chimpanzees. While the complete evolutionary process of humans from primate is still a mystery, a larger picture of human evolution has been formed. How humans were actually evolved, it is still a mystery. Nobody has a clear idea. However, we have a formed picture now. Some of our ancestors, okay, we say humans evolved from, we had lot of ancestors which include starting from Dryopithecus, Ramapithecus, Australopithecus, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, Cro-Magnon man, and finally us, the Homo sapiens. Okay, Cro-Magnon man is the our actual ancestors. whose fossils were found. Okay, we got their fossils, so we can say they existed. However, others are actually imaginary. Okay, we imagine that maybe human beings were evoluted in this way. Okay, a larger picture starting from Dryopithecus, ending to Homo sapiens, we evoluted. This is known as evoluted. We say Dryopithecus. Okay, they were walking with their 4 legs. Then Ramapithecus, they slightly, they started to stand, and then came the Australopithecus, who were slightly bent. However, they were walking with 2 legs. Then Homo erectus, who actually stood straight, but their face actually looks like a chimpanzee. Then Homo neanderthalensis. Okay, if you look at their picture, their face is also little elongated. They don't actually resemble a man, they actually resemble a chimpanzee. Cro-Magnon man is our ancestor whose face resembled to our face to a greater extent. And finally us, the Homo sapiens. Okay, human evolution traces back to Africa. It is believed that all the people that are present across the world, they actually migrated from Africa. This is all about human evolution. So we have covered the whole chapter, heredity and evolution, in our today's session. Hope the session was helpful to you. Please concentrate and listen to the class, study well and do your exams well. Thank you.